Good morning, everyone. My name is Christos Senos. I'm from University of Delaware. I'm a graduate student there, and thank you all for coming this morning. I'm going to talk about IPv6 setup for your home and some security implications of it. And I want to thank Chase for showing me this idea and helping me set it up. So before I go into it, let's ask the question: why should we bother to do this? Why would we want to transition our home network from v4 to v6? I mean, v4 has been we've been using it for a long time. It's stable. It's good. It works. Probably a lot of you know that when an internet service provider gives you a v4 address, there's usually only one public address. And if you're trying to connect to your internal network outside of it, like let's say if you're at work or you're in an airport or something like that, you need to set up something like port forwarding or VPN. So you would need to go inside the router and twiddle around with the settings, and then if let's say if your port number changes, then you have to go back inside your router and configure that. IPv6 it actually in the v6 RFC there's a requirement that your internet service provider will give you a /64 allocation. V6 address, it's 128 bits, so that means you have 2 to the 128 addresses total, and then if somebody gives you a /64 allocation, that means you have 2 to the 64 public routable addresses. So if we do the math, 2 to the 32, that's roughly 4 billion, right? We know that's around 9 zeros, right? So if we multiply 4 billion times 4 billions, that's around that's around 18. That's around 18 zeros, right? That's a whole lot of IP addresses that we can use that are public. V6, it's actually it's not really being widely used. It's just out there, and it's something that's already configured in all of our computers automatically already. And it's out there, but we don't really use it. The two ways you can actually, us as users, as host users, can get v6 addresses is through native support through our ISP or through tunneling techniques. Let's actually look at what percentage of users are actually IPv6 enabled. So this is a chart I took a couple of days ago that from Google, and it shows you when out of all the people that visit Google, what percentage of them have v6 enabled. So what percentage are actually using v6 addresses. And you can see the total number is only 7.4%. And it's broken down into native and tunneling techniques. So you can see most people are using native. In the way that the public addresses are allocated is there's usually there's 5 different organizations around the world that give out these addresses, and the one that we mostly hear about are ARIN and RIPE. ARIN is the one that functions in North America, and RIPE is the one that functions mostly in Europe. So these are called regional internet registries. and then local internet registries are their customers. So they get the assignments, and then they either allocate these assignments to their customers, which is us, or they assign it to themselves. So here on the left-hand side is the illustration from Aaron, the North American sector, and it shows you IPv4 allocation requests. For instance, in June have been around 261, the number of requests. The number of V6 allocations have only been 26 in June. So you can see that number is much lower. So on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, you can see a graph from RIPE, which is the European RIR, and it shows that the blue line is the number of ISPs that already have a dual stack, so they give both V4 and V6 address. And the red line represents the number of ISPs that only give out a V4 address. So you can see the trend is moving towards a V4, V6 dual stack. So Comcast, which is probably one of the leading ISPs out there, is now starting to roll out dual V4 VStack solution. So on their website, they in late 2013 they had a statement that 25% of their customers have support dual V4 V6 addresses. So it's my assumption that since then that number has increased much larger, to the point where now in the region of Delaware, maybe in Maryland, Comcast offers a dual V4 V6 stack. So if you want to find out if you're a Comcast customer and you want to find out if you have V6 enabled, what you can do is you can check your modem online to see whether it's V6 enabled. So you would go to this website, see if there's a check mark next to your modem, and if it is, what you do is you unplug your NAT box, so your router, you throw it somewhere, and you connect your computer directly to your modem. And if you have your V6 address, you should get a /128 address. And then there are websites online where you can check your V6 status. So if you go to testipv6.com, it will tell you if your V6 is hooked up and ready to go. So it'll give you some information about your ISP. And then you can do a IPv6 test to Google to see whether there's connectivity. This side, this address actually is only a 128. So if you want to have a /64 address, then you can buy a cheap router from eBay, and you can turn on V6 from there. But now the router has to have V6 capability, so it has to be IPv6 capable. So a D-Link router, when you turn it on, it'll have DHCP lease, which with a /128 and /64 address. I'm not sure if you guys can see this. Is this?
No.
Okay. Can you guys see this? Slightly?
You've got an FP80 and you've got your
Yeah, so here you can see that this is the /64 address.
temporary address and you got your
Yeah, so this is, I have configured at my computer. So you can see here that this is a /64 address. So that means we have 4 billion times 4 billion addresses that we can use that are public. So if Compass does not give you a v6 address yet, or if you're using another ISP, you can still get a v6 address using tunneling. So here you can see in the cloud there's a 541 column 1 point of presence, and these are different points of presences that are just out there. They're free, that you can just create an account, log in, and use. So, and then you can see inside your network, you need to have a gateway of some sort. So your gateway is your tunnel endpoint. So in your gateway, you have a 541 colon 2 address, and then on another interface towards your internal network, you have another v6 address. Like let's say here the assignment is A51 colon 1. So these two addresses are actually given to you by your tunneling vendor. So the two that we know about that we use are Hurricane Electric, and they can give you a 40A prefix too if you request it. So that's if you want to set up v6 networks inside other v6 networks. So you have an even bigger address space. The only caveat is that when you set up a tunnel with Hurricane Electric, the gateway needs to be added to the DMZ zone of the router because it's a native 6 and 4 tunnel. So you use just regular Linux tunnel technique, but it needs to be actually publicly accessible. The other tunneling provider is I know of is 6, and you can actually do the tunneling without touching the router. So you don't need to put anything in DMZ, and it actually it dials out to your point of presence, to your POP. And it also has a heart beating technique where if you have a dynamic IPv4 address from your ISP that changes constantly, this heartbeat will update that address remotely so that it always keeps track of where you are. So if you so you can actually don't need to have the gateway and the router separate. You can consolidate them into one device. So for me, I have an old router, probably I bought it 7 years ago, and it doesn't have v6 support. So what I did was I updated the firmware to OpenWRT, and I downloaded the 6 client, which it's called iQ. So you just turn that on, and it'll generate a v6 address for you. It'll give you that v6 address that you can then use in your internal network. And so this address, A541 colon 1, you need to statically assign that, both in this scenario and in the past scenario. You need to actually manually assign this address. And you need to set up forwarding in your gateway and set up the appropriate firewall rules for v6 forwarding. When you do that on your internal interface, you need to start up RADV, which is that sends routing advertisements, and that's stateless auto configuration that then the internal devices will receive, and that will automatically get a v6 address. So the clients, actually, they don't need to do anything. It's like a lightweight DHCP server, except that the clients, they don't actually run a DHCP client, they just automatically get its addresses. And this is called SLAC, stateless auto configuration. So when you get these addresses, you usually get two addresses. And the first address is actually derived from your MAC address. So you can see up top that the first v6 address is similar to the MAC address, and you can actually, from that address, you can derive what the MAC address is. So obviously, this is a security issue, because if you're using that as your source IPv6 address, and then some dude at some server is listening to that traffic, he can see what the source address is, and then he can derive the MAC address, and he can actually track down each user, because he'll always have that v6 address. So you can enable privacy extensions that will generate a random v6 address that is then used by default. So you can see the second address is the random address, and then if you ping Google, that will be the default address that's being used. So to enable this in Linux at sysctl, you would turn this on. And I also noticed that the Arch Linux wiki suggests that you turn the other two options on. However, when I did that, I noticed that I got a whole bunch of different v6 addresses, which is okay, but I mean, you just kind of like see like 5 or 6 different v6 addresses all of a sudden. But those addresses are still being used rather than your address that's derived from your Mac. Another cool feature that I want to make you guys aware of is the IRR I mentioned earlier, right? It actually provides you a web interface through which you can check your connectivity. And this is both for v4 and v6, which you can do. What you do is you apply online, and they give you this probe, which I have pictured here, and you can plug it into your network, and it's a passive device. It doesn't do anything except for when Write issues a request for a scan, it will issue a scan from that probe to your location that you specify. So here I'm doing a test to my Comcast v6 address on their network, and it issues a traceroute probe from all over the world, from these little devices all over the world, and that will probe my address to see whether they can connect to it. So you can see here that they have addresses from Italy, from Japan, from Germany, and then you can click any of them and you can see the traceroute trace. So it's a really cool thing. There's 2 YouTube videos that I thought were really cool about it. The second one talks more about the infrastructure and how it's set up. Because the website is actually very nice, it's very responsive and very interactive, so it's kind of interesting to see how all that data is being generated. There are, of course, security implementations. When something becomes more complicated, becomes more of a security issue, and that's just for anything. So when we look at IPv6, we need to look at from a user's perspective. So if I'm a home user and I'm running v6, what can happen to me? What should I be aware of? Well, so if, let's say, my father walks into my house and gets a v6 address, then he's not aware of that. You know, he's just has a v6 address, and it's a public address that anybody else could attack. So one of the things that we can do is that we can set a VLAN on the internal interface so that only people that are on that VLAN can get a v6 address. So that will mitigate the issue. And privacy extension probably need to be turned on. And you guys know Snort and pfSense actually support v6. So you can enable traces through Snort in v6. And you can generate a whitelist of all your devices. So all the devices that you know about. This can be done actually with DHCP version 6. Probably can be done with RADV that I showed earlier, because you need to give only v6 addresses to those devices that you know. I showed earlier that you can set up a v6 gateway in your network. So let's imagine a scenario where you have an unsecured access point, and then somebody comes into your network, hacks your box, and then starts up something like IQ, and hands out v6 addresses to everybody in the internal network. What will happen is that the traffic will pass through that rogue node, and it will become a man in the middle, so that he can view, modify the traffic, do anything that he wants with it. If you really want to get rid of that, I guess you can turn off v6, which is it's kind of like what we do, what the IT department does at University of Delaware, I think, like based on what I've talked about with some people, and you can detect new v6 addresses that come on. To do that, if you ping FF02, the multicast address, and you need to specify the interface that you're going out of, you can see all your v6 addresses on the network. And then you can generate a whitelist for your devices that are on there. And if you see a new one, you can tell them, you can ban them from connection. There's also really cool utilities from the Hacker's Choice. They have stuff like finding out what v6 addresses on your network, doing v6 flooding, sending man-in-the-middle attacks with v6 and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff out there. The thing with v6 is that it's a lot more complicated than v4. It's more than just addressing. There's actually some protocol stuff going on there. So it's important to educate yourself about v6 and know what its capabilities are. With v4, it's still the NAT techniques still hides host, but you can still get into the network. So you need to get into the habit of assuming that this internal nodes are eventually going to be public, and get into the technique of being able to secure them correctly. This concludes my talk. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.